Allen Company, 47 years young and a proud sponsor, wishes OOIDA all the best as you celebrate 50 years.
OOIDA, representing America's truckers since 1973, presents Landline Now with your host, Mark Reddick.
Broker fraud is running rampant in trucking, and it's causing all kinds of problems for owner-operators who work with those companies. I'll get the latest on that and more from Tom Crowley and Kristopher Snyder of OOIDA's Business Services Department. Policy endorsements can be an important part of your insurance plan. Today, Landline Now's Ashley Blackford sits down with OOIDA's Truck Insurance Department to discuss what additional coverage you should have. And finally, Minnesota has legalized the use of marijuana, but some are concerned about the effect on highway safety. Scott Thompson covers that and what 2 states are doing about price gouging at the pump with our state legislative expert, Keith Goebel. But first, the news with Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Mark. For the third straight week, the average cost for a gallon of diesel went up on the Energy Information Administration's weekly report. The agency says last week's price jumped more than 11 cents to just under $4.24. Every region saw prices jump, ranging from New England, which saw a hike of more than 7 cents, to California, which had prices spike by more than 18 cents. Since mid-July, the national average has gone up by more than 43 cents. Tom Kloza, global head of energy analysis for the Oil Price Information Service, told Landline recently that the price of crude oil is a major reason prices are spiking.
The Saudis extended their cuts of 1 million barrels a day through August, and they're probably going to extend it through September as well. And some of the other OPEC countries appear to have cut. And then Russia, of all things, is not exporting as much as they'd like to. So that's tightened up oil to where there's probably about 2 million barrels a day more demand than there is supply in the third quarter. That'll change. So that's lifted prices by about $12 or $13 for crude, which transfers to about 25 or 30 cents. And then U.S. refineries have had some issues with hot weather. They haven't been able to run probably about 700,000 barrels a day of capacity, mostly at the Gulf Coast. And so the wholesale prices are up about 60 cents from July 3rd, and you're starting to see that on the street now.
ProMiles.com numbers also reflect the changing landscape. The average price Tuesday morning came in at $4.14 a gallon, up 7 cents compared to last Tuesday. The bill in the U.S. House that would prevent FMCSA from implementing a speed limiter mandate has picked up some more support. Representative Chip Roy of Texas has signed on as a co-sponsor to H.R. 3039, otherwise known as the DRIVE Act. That brings the total number of co-sponsors now to 25. The House bill was introduced earlier this year by Representative Josh Brecheen of Oklahoma. The fight against speed limiters is now happening in both chambers of Congress. Senator Steve Daines of Montana recently introduced a companion piece of legislation with the same name, the DRIVE Act, in the Senate. Senator Daines says studies have shown that speed limiting devices on large commercial motor vehicles make roads less safe by increasing congestion and creating dangerous speed differentials between cars and trucks. He added that FMCSA's attempts to impose a mandate were, quote, overreaching and, quote, out of touch. Although the agency has yet to announce a top speed for trucks, safety advocates have lobbied for it to be set at 60 miles an hour. That could create speed differentials exceeding 20 miles an hour in some areas. OOIDA has launched a campaign to oppose FMCSA's proposal and support the efforts in Congress to stop it at fightingfortruckers.com. Yellow's demise appears to be opening up opportunities for other shippers. During XPO's second quarter earnings call, the company's chief strategy officer fielded a question about what the shipment count was near the end of July when Yellow began winding down operations. Ali Fagri said tonnage and shipment counts accelerated at the end of last month, somewhere in the neighborhood of a 3,000 shipment per day increase. That's a similar number to what TFI was seeing around that same time, according to its CEO. Meanwhile, load post volumes for dry van uncharacteristically increased in the first shipping week of the month following last week's 3% gain. Landline Now's Ashley Blackford has the details.
As fall quickly approaches, so does the fall shipping season. Robert Rouse with DAT says they saw another small increase in overall load volume for the third week in a row.
So last week, we saw about a 3.8% increase in total load volume, up to 1.4 million loads. When we look at the number of trucks on the DAT load board, for the second straight week, we saw a decrease by around 6% to 350,000, almost 351,000 trucks on the market. So while loads increased and trucks posted on the DAT load board decreased over the last week, we did see load-to-truck ratios increase across all three equipment types, which is a good sign.
Rouse says volumes are down about 36% year over year, but still about 20% higher than in 2019. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford.
Thanks, Ashley. The California Air Resources Board has launched a new program that's designed to help owner-operators transition to zero-emissions vehicles. It's called Cal Fleet Advisor. The state's Advanced Clean Fleets rule is a driving force behind the program. By the year 2045, California will require that all trucks in the state are operating at zero-emission levels. Part of the program is helping people understand those requirements. The other part is providing other assistance, including a single point of contact for questions and needs, and an individualized action plan that provides information about approved technology and funding options for fleet owners and single operators. CARB says the Cal Fleet Advisor program will prioritize smaller businesses and independent owner-operators. Applications are now being accepted. TFI International has announced a deal to acquire Wisconsin-based JHT Holdings. JHT transports new trucks from manufacturing and final assembly plants to dealers and end customers, or in other words, driving the customer's new trucks to their destination. With the acquisition, TFI gains access to JHT's terminal network, which is made up of 25 facilities throughout the U.S. and Canada. Terms of the deal were not announced. U.S. Customs and Border Protection is touting another big drug bust in Texas. This time, officers intercepted nearly 500 pounds of methamphetamine worth an estimated $4.3 million. The CBP says it happened late last week at the Far International Bridge cargo facility. A semi inbound from Mexico was flagged for a secondary inspection. That's when officers found the meth among a load of vegetables. The drugs and tractor trailer were seized, and the driver is now facing charges. Expect delays over the next couple of weeks if your work takes you through Far Texas. Overnight closures will be in effect through August 25th while crews work on the Interstate 2, Interstate 69C interchange project. Depending on the day, lanes and exits and underpasses could be closed. A woman best known to her online followers as Sassy Trucker, who was detained in Dubai for months, is on her way home. Tiara Allen was being held by authorities in the UAE after an altercation at a car rental agency in April. Although the details of what happened there aren't clear, an advocate for Allen says she was facing possible charges for shouting at an employee. Publicly insulting another person in the United Arab Emirates can carry a 1-year prison sentence and fines. Allen's advocate said she settled the dispute and caught a flight Tuesday that will ultimately bring her back to the U.S. A few dozen new truck parking spaces just opened up outside of Ohio State Capitol. Sheetz opened the doors on its 24th store in the Columbus area today. It's in London, Ohio, off Interstate 70 at exit 79. The location has 41 truck parking spaces, which are available for use overnight, along with 7 diesel and DEF lanes. And finally, Love's Travel Stops has announced another big donation to the St. Kristopher Truckers Relief Fund. The company cut a $100,000 check to the nonprofit, which helps professional drivers and their families during difficult times. This is the 4th straight year Love's has made a donation to St. Kristopher, which helps cover expenses like rent, mortgage, and utility payments when drivers are unable to work due to injury or illness. It also provides free health and wellness programs. That's Landline Now News for today. I'm Scott Thompson.
Thanks, Scott. Next, I'll discuss the latest on broker fraud with Tom Crowley and Kristopher Snyder of OOIDA's Business Services Department. We'll be back in just a moment with more. I'm Mark Reddick, and this is Landline Now.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
Forget miss accuracy, weigh your truck on a cat scale.
When you weigh on a cat scale, you get a no excuses guarantee. You can now save time weighing by using your smartphone. Find out more at weightmytruck.com.
Since you started, what you've loved about trucking is the freedom. Heading out on your favorite route, a good driving song, and thinking about truck insurance. Well, maybe not that last one. That's why we're here. At OOIDA, we have a full range of truck insurance products, expert advice, and great customer service, helping you get the right coverage for your operation. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Landline now. Welcome back. Broker fraud is running rampant in trucking, and it's causing all kinds of problems for owner-operators who work with those companies. Here with the latest on that and more are Tom Crowley and Kristopher Snyder of OOIDA's Business Services Department. Guys, thanks for joining me.
Good to be here.
Glad to be here.
Thank you.
Let's start with this broker fraud thing. And one of the things right now, Tom, is brokers setting up legit companies and never paying, which to me makes me question the whole legit company thing. Walk us through, if you would, what you're hearing from people about what's happening here.
Yeah, Mark. I mean, a lot of the fraud that's going on in the industry out there is it's not new, but it's really ramped up this last year. I mean, it's just to all-time highs. Broker fraud, so a new entity will set up as a brokerage. They'll get a bond in place. They'll apply for their authority, and they will be set up as and I use these little air quotes, quote unquote, legit company. But are they legit when they don't pay and when they do a lot of double brokering and scams and they pull loads? They either team up with a so-called legit carrier, or they just pull the fraud off themselves, where they'll go on the load boards, they'll pull loads off there as if they're the carrier, that they're going to haul the load, and then they turn right around and tender it out for brokerage to somebody else. A lot of the times, especially with the low rates that are out there, they'll jack the rates up. They'll make it look like a better load than what it was, and somebody will come along and grab onto that load and think, man, this is going to make my money right. All right, finally, I got a good load, only to not get paid at all. So there's just so much going on out there that carriers, they've got to be aware. They've got to know how to vet these brokers. Just like brokers vet carriers need to vet the brokers too.
So walk us through that a little bit. I mean, how do you tell good from the bad? How do you vet these brokers?
Well, when you go on a load board and you find a load that you are interested in, now granted, you don't have a lot of time because everything's competition. There's somebody else looking at those loads too. But, you've got to go through, and if it's not a broker that you've worked with before, then you've got to look at their information. You've got to look at their phone number, their email address. You've got to start looking for ways. You have to look at the information and see if you can verify it. Now, you can do some of this by going to the FMCSA's website, pulling up the broker information, and looking at the address that's listed there, the phone numbers that are listed there. And if you can't determine if they're legit or not, call the phone number that's listed on the Fed's website. If it goes back to that same brokerage, and then you can say, hey, let me talk to this broker, and you can go that way, kind of backwards into it, so that you can independently verify that they are who they say they are. I mean, because even some of your bigger brokerage firms out there are getting, they're getting spoofed. They're getting people who are coming by and making up the information to make it look like they are some of these bigger firms. One of them that I'll say is really getting hammered with the double broker scams is like Amazon loads. People go out there and pull Amazon loads. Well, if you pull them from Amazon, that's one thing. But if you're pulling them off the load boards and it's an Amazon load from PDQ brokerage, well, that's an issue right there, because Amazon loads, they don't double broker them out, or they don't co-broker them out. Let me say, because that whole co-brokering is another issue, but they don't do that. So. And if you haul the load and it's an Amazon load, but you hauled it for a different brokerage and you haul it, you don't really have any recourse, because, you can't get a hold of Amazon. They don't answer their phone just to call them up and say, hey, I got one of your loads. It was double brokered and I didn't get paid. What do I do? Amazon's not going to deal with you. There's no way to get a hold of Amazon. That's an issue. So it's just rampant. I mean, there are so many different scams. I mean, we could sit here and waste hours just talking about each individual scam. And as we do that, there's more coming along every day.
You mentioned, of course, looking them up on the FMCSA's website and things like that. Are credit checks useful here?
They're not as useful as you'd think. I mean, a lot of folks factor their freight. So they go to their factor and they pull a credit check on some of these brokers. And they'll show that, they pay their bills. They've got so many days to pay and so on and so forth. And it all looks legit, except for you're not dealing with that actual broker. You're dealing with a scam who has put on a front to be that broker, try to appear to be that broker, but they're not. And they're probably not even based in this country. Some of these scams that are going on come from overseas. How do you deal with that? How do you collect when you've been taken advantage of there? I mean, you go to the Attorney General or to the
Inspector General?
Inspector General, thank you. You go and make a complaint. You go to the FMCSA, you go to the NCCDB, you make a complaint there. You can make a complaint all these places, but there's nothing happens. There's, how do they go back when the people that are perpetrating these frauds come from overseas? I mean, there's just nothing out there that is going to make it okay. There's nothing out there that's going to say, all right, we'll get you your money. There's just no way to go about it. An actual broker, a legit broker, will have a bond. And if they don't pay you, you can go back against their bond. But these fraud brokers, I mean, that's where you got to check and make sure there's a bond in place. That's one of the things that I mentioned when checking the FMCSA's website is check to make sure they've got a bond. Because there just is no protection for the small carrier out there. It's buyer beware. It's operate at your own risk.
Well, even with the bond, you've got the whole problem of who else is making a claim on that bond.
Yes, some of these fraudulent brokers that we've seen out there that do have a bond in place, but they'll have $1.5 million worth of freight rolling down the road or worth of haul rates going down the road for a $75,000 bond. So you take that and you divide that out between all the carriers that have got ripped off, and you end up with pennies on the dollar, maybe. And that's months later before you even get that.
Okay. Beyond the scams and schemes, we have an ongoing problem with broker-carrier contracts. And you've talked a little bit about this before, some of the difficulties that people are running into there. Once again, can you kind of draw out the problem, explain the problem that we're dealing with?
Well, the problem is, number one, that small carriers, they sign these contracts without reading them and understanding them, or understanding them if they do read them, is that these contracts are what dictates their relationship with this broker. Well, there are these broker-carrier contracts written by the brokers. They don't want to negotiate with the carrier on these. They just want to say, here's our contract, take it or leave it. There are situations there where people call up and say, what rights do I have? Well, you don't really have any rights other than what's written in the contract. There's nothing there that says everything must be fair and balanced. Although you would hope it would be, you would think it would be. It's not. These contracts are written very heavy-handedly and slanted in the broker's favor. It'll be a situation where you're hauling a load that is a $100,000 load. You're liable for that load while it's on your truck. You're hoping to make a couple of $1,000s off that load if all goes well. But there's no guarantees there. As before the show, we were talking about a situation where I had a guy that showed up at a receiver 10 a.m. this morning, looking to get his load pulled off. He shows up there. The receiver says, no, that's not the way we work. You got to drop your trailer. It'll take us 2 to 7 days to get it unloaded, and then you come back and pick it up. Show me a small carrier, 1 or 2 truck operation that can be hung up for that long, 2 to 7 days, waiting on their trailer to be unloaded. So they call me up and they say, well, what are my rights? All I could say is, well, what's your contract say? He said, well, I don't know. I'll have to find it. Well, let's find it. Let's discuss what's in there, because there's nothing in there. I can almost guarantee you there's nothing in there that's going to cover you on this. It's going to be a negotiation. You're going to have to negotiate a rate for what it's going to cost for your trailer to sit there 2 to 7 days. Now, in the meanwhile, you've already got other freight booked. That's of no consequence. You've got, places you got to get. Maybe you've got a driver that you told you'd have home or whatever. These brokers, none of that matters to them. The only thing that is their concern is that load that's on your truck right now. And you're in a real compromised position to negotiate any kind of an out here. As I told this individual this morning, I said, your options are really narrow. I mean, you can tell the broker, no, I can't do this. I tendered for delivery. My contract says 10 a.m. And, if we can't do that, then I'm going to look for storage, put this stuff into storage, and we'll deal with it there. And I told the carrier, the problem is you will probably be in court. You will probably have to go to court because nothing in that contract gives you that option. So small carriers really need to read these contracts. They need to know what's in them, know what their obligations are. There's nothing in these contracts that allow for a truck to break down, for a driver to be sick, for any number of things. There's nothing in these contracts that allow for that. If any of that happens and you're late, you are in breach, and they will fine you. They will, as we've seen, all kinds of stuff. I mean, they'll fine you for being late. They'll fine you for being early. They come up with all reasons to fine you. But you want to go back on the broker and say, well, hey, I want to fine you for screwing up my delivery appointment. There's no option in that contract for that. It's just very one-sided, and small carriers need to be aware of what they're up against.
Well, I'm curious because we talk sometimes about, like when we talked about leasing on with a carrier, that you can make notes in that contract, you can scratch out sections and initial it, and it's a negotiation with that carrier. Is there a capability here to negotiate with these brokers and to try and alter the contract?
Well, as with any contract, it can be negotiated and altered and made to fit both parties if both parties agree. The problem is these brokers, they're not going to if they send you a contract and you look through it and you make notes and you cross some stuff out and say, no, I don't agree to this and that and the other. The brokers could say, okay, and they could initial that, and that could become the way the contract is. But they don't do that. They say, no, here's our contract. It's a take it or leave it. It's non-negotiable. So many times the small carriers, they just don't realize the verbiage, the way this stuff works out, how it's stacked against them. They don't realize this until the crap hits the fan, and they're calling up saying, hey, this is how this is. What are my options here? And that's when it comes back to, like I mentioned earlier, you don't really have any options. Your options are what's in that contract, and that contract is written in favor of the broker and the broker's customer.
It sounds like, to a great extent, whatever you've got to do has got to happen before you ever sign on to carry that load. You've got to find a legitimate broker whose contract doesn't include some of this crap.
Yeah, that's the thing. You do need to find brokers that are fair, balanced, that are looking for everybody to be profitable rather than just themselves. So much of this too, it comes back where carriers call them, they say, yeah, the broker took 50% off this load or something. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But there's nothing that keeps them from doing that. There's nothing illegal about that. They can keep as much as they want. It definitely comes to you have to work with brokers that are fair and balanced, that want to be even for everybody and not just take it all for themselves.
Is there any other advice that you can offer folks here in the time we have left, Tom?
If you come across a new broker, you haven't worked with them before, you can always give us a call in the compliance department. We can tell you what we know of them. We can discuss the contract and what you can do before you get in a bad situation. You would much rather deal with it beforehand than after the fact.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Thank you.
I've been talking with Tom Crowley and Kristopher Snyder of OOIDA's Business Services Department about broker problems that people are running into out there. And folks, if you have a question or a concern, call Business Services before you sign on that line. The number is 816-229-5791. I'm Mark Rettig, and this is Landline Now.
You trust PrePass for more bypasses? Now let PrePass help with tolls. PrePass toll service means lower cost, one invoice for all tolls, and fewer violations. Created by truckers for truckers. Call 877-878-5970 or go to prepass.com.
Attention all truckers, Dean Michael, the tax doctor here. I want to talk to you about those dreaded tax problems. I know you want to keep on trucking and not even think about them, but let's face it, they're not going away all on their own. You need professional help. I've been helping truckers put their tax problems in the rearview mirror for years. course, I can help you too. Call me now for a free consultation at 888-557-4020 or go to mytaxhelpmd.com. It's like I always say, keep your eyes on the road, I'll keep mine on the IRS. 888-557-4020.
Landline now. Welcome back. Like tires, fuel, and an engine, insurance is one of those things you just have to have for your truck. But not all insurance is created equal. Ashley Blackford is here with the experts from OOIDA's Truck Insurance Department to answer some questions.
Thanks, Mark, and hello to Trina, Skywalker, and Trista Roby with OOIDA's Insurance Department. How are you doing today, ladies?
Fantastic.
Hi, great. How about you?
I am wonderful.
Good.
Today we are talking about policy endorsements. Now, of course, there's a variety of different ones on your insurance policies. Are these typically things that are automatically on a policy, or would the policyholder have to ask for them?
Really, that's just going to be up to each individual insurance company. So it's always a great idea to ask.
I would venture to say, too, that with most places, it's going to be a combination of both. There's going to be some stuff that's automatically an endorsement in the policy, and some of it's going to be an option.
Now, there are a number of different endorsements someone might see on a trucking policy. Can you kind of walk me through what some of those are?
So probably the most common one that you're going to see is reefer breakdown. When you're dealing with refrigerated trailers, most companies are going to want that reefer breakdown coverage to ensure if something happens to the reefer in the process of transit that load is covered.
Is that something that's automatically going to be on if I'm hauling reefer?
Again,
I suppose it depends on.
Again, probably should be in most cases. I think some insurance companies say if there's a reefer on the policy that it automatically includes reefer breakdown. I think some actually have to physically endorse it on. So that's where, especially if you're changing your operation from like a dry van to a reefer, it's a really great idea to ask your insurance agent, does this include reefer breakdown, or what are the policy terms and conditions of reefer breakdown if it is included? Because, you are going to run into those, and those are going to be different as well. Some of them, say that you have to keep service records or have it serviced every so often.
Some have an age restriction.
Yes.
Some may not have an age restriction and just have a higher deductible on it than you normally would on your cargo.
Yeah, that's exactly. I was going to mention sometimes it's just a higher deductible.
Another one that I can't say it's new, but I mean, it's in comparison to other policy endorsements. There's one that most insurance companies have to offer now called terrorism, and that came about after 9/11. And that's because...
So new, like 20 plus years old.
It doesn't feel like that long ago to us. But
Right. But yeah, that's something that was mandatory after 9/11 because insurance policies exclude acts of war and terrorism generally. And so this is an endorsement, and it's usually pretty inexpensive. Like we only offer it on the cargo now, but for a small fee, it's basically coverage for your cargo if it's damaged due to an act of terrorism. And it has to be a declared act of terrorism.
That's where that one gets kind of wonky because if it's not something where the President of the United States comes in and literally declares it an act of war or terrorism, then it's probably something more like vandalism or something along those lines. So it's a wonky coverage, I think, or addition.
It is, and that's probably why it's generally so inexpensive. And I wouldn't say the majority of people purchase it.
No.
It's if they do, it's because it doesn't cost a lot, but generally they're not interested. It is something that's available though.
Another one would be the MCS 90, which is required by FMCSA. And if you have an audit, they're going to ask to see it in the event of an audit. But really that's the part that says that the insurance company, I'm sure everybody has heard us discuss this a lot, but that's the one that makes the insurance company responsible for all owned and or operated equipment. So in other words, if there's a truck that you own that you haven't disclosed to your insurance company that's running possibly under your numbers, possibly under your name, but somebody else's numbers, that's the one that can draw insurance companies into claims, and that's the one that insurance companies, that's the reason that they're asking so many questions about owned and operated equipment.
Mm-hmm. And Trista's right, we've done like whole topics on that. So to summarize that one briefly is not
it's a lot,
easy.
Yeah.
But it is a policy endorsement. Another one is like EPA cleanup or pollution liability. I would guess that every insurance company has to have something about that in their policy because, for example, we don't cover hazmat haulers. It's not something we can write coverage for, which is a lot of the time when you'll need a pollution liability or EPA cleanup. But we still can't negate the fact that if there's an accident and there's fuel from the truck that spills in the course of that accident, as the insurance company, we're still responsible for that cleanup and to get that area back to how it was before. So that's one I would say is probably in every policy. I don't know if other companies charge extra for it or not, but it's something that has to be present.
And sometimes I've seen it in other policies where there's a small amount built in. And then, sometimes kind of like our supplemental tow and cleanup, which is a whole different subject for a different day. Also something we've done a whole topic on, but where they can purchase additional EPA cleanup. And again, just something that you really have to ask your insurance company to know.
Right.
Family emergency travel, that one is actually probably the newest one for us.
True.
And that's because we started seeing other people endorse that onto their policies, and it started to becoming, there was kind of a demand for it. But that's really just if you're injured or deceased when you're away from home, that's going to, due to an accident in your truck, it'll help with your family's travel expenses to actually get to where you are.
Trista was right. Reefer breakdown is very common. I would say one of the other most common ones is an additional insured endorsement. And that's essentially where you're adding another insured on your policy. It's most common with like a lease purchase situation. So I own a truck and Lisa, I own a truck and Trista's going to lease to own it. Because my name's still on the title, but she's carrying insurance, most of the time I'm going to say, you have to put me as another insured on your policy because it's titled in my name. But we see it a lot with brokers and shippers too. Sometimes they've been advised by their legal counsel. But essentially, if something happens, that means we would represent them in court as well as the named insured. And that one is requested a lot. That's also one that I know of where some insurance companies will charge extra. And I know we're not talking about rates right now, but if you are shopping rates, it is good to know if the company charges extra for that because, maybe you get a quote that's $200 a year less, but maybe they charge $25 a pop for everyone that wants to be additional insured. And so that can add up and really make your annual premium higher than you were quoted. So,
and something else with that additional insured endorsement and some of the reason that shippers and brokers will ask for it is usually it provides a little bit more notice of cancellation in the event the insurance policy is going to cancel. So, I really feel like a lot of them get use out of that portion of it,
right?
As opposed to the legal counsel. That's an if,
right?
So,
well, and we actually see it commonly with folks who rent a parking space, and for the owner of the property, I think for them it's a little bit more, in their mind, a little bit more protection if something should happen with your truck on their property. And not everyone can park at home. A lot of people do have to rent a spot at a facility, and we see that a lot with them too.
Hired auto, this is one a lot of times, specifically we see it with UIIA. There could...
with the acronyms.
Yes, yeah. Hey, we didn't make this one up. This is the Uniform Interchange Intermodal Agreement, or it's backwards. Uniform Intermodal.
Anyway. See, it's not easy, is it?
It's not when there's two I's.
It's not even easy to say UIIA.
No, it's not. But that's where we see it most often. And hired auto is kind of a strange one to me because it's a lot like an any auto policy. That's what it reminds me of. But it allows coverage for vehicles that you hire, rent, or borrow. Usually there's an additional premium with it, and it marks a box on a certificate for those shippers and brokers.
Yeah. We offer it, but it is for incidents like OOIDA because our customer has to have it in order to haul those loads. But we still have to stress this is a scheduled auto policy. You still have to list all of your equipment on the policy. So, if that is something that you purchase through your insurance agent, I would ask about that too, because you don't want to assume that that's going to just cover anything that you borrow from a friend or things of that nature. I mean, the insurance company still has policies and guidelines. So definitely one I would inquire further about if you have to have it. The next one it's kind of an awkward one because it doesn't come up often at all. And it's not something we have to discuss often, but it is an endorsement in the policy. And it's LTL.
We didn't make it up.
Yeah. No, I know.
It's less than trailer load is what that acronym means. But what that does is it allows coverage for the cargo when it's not in the trailer. Again, we don't talk about it often because hardly anyone is going to offload that freight knowing that they have to put it back on the trailer. Like there has to be a good reason that that's happening. But if it does happen and the cargo is outside of the trailer, and usually it's a short period of time that's allowed coverage for, but if it's outside of the trailer, that endorsement does still allow coverage for the freight for a small period of time.
New car valuation is next, and strictly for our car haulers or automobile haulers, but basically when a car is damaged within your load,
a brand new car,
a brand new vehicle is damaged within your load, it has automatically depreciated. And what this does is it allows for the payout of that vehicle not depreciated at the new car value. So this would be typically something that a shipper or broker would require you to have also. Good protection for you as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and generally in those situations, the insurance company will pay that total value and keep the salvage because they're not going to pay a total loss on a new car and let them have the car too.
Yeah, understandably so.
This last one is another one that we've done whole segments on, but it's regarding dash cams, and it is potentially an endorsement to the policy. A lot of times insurance companies will offer a reduced deductible or a waived deductible if you have an accident, but you have dash cam footage. It helps them settle the claim quickly. Usually it doesn't matter if you're at fault or not. Definitely something I would inquire about because we recommend having dash cams anyway, and if it can reduce your deductible, even if you are at fault, it's good to know, and it's good to have.
Yep.
What do you recommend for people who are calling their insurance company and not knowing what is covered, what isn't covered, or what endorsements they should have?
Ask questions. I mean, that's really the most important thing. You know, if you're doing something like reefer hauling, car hauling, OOIDA hauling, those sort of things, you're going to sort of know or have heard along the way some of the things that you're going to need. So make sure and ask, is new car evaluation included? Can I purchase it for additional, that sort of thing?
Also, policy wording is a very fascinating read.
Ooh, don't do it. No, I'm just kidding. It is
we recommend
important.
That too. Yeah.
Yes.
All right, ladies, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Our thanks to Trina Skywalker and Trista Roby of OOIDA's Truck Insurance Department. If you have any questions about insurance, you can call 816-229-5791. For Landline Now, I'm Ashley Blackford. We'll be back after this.
Firestone tires are for more of everything. More miles for every tire dollar, and more confidence in your fleet. At Firestone, we help fleets save with dependable value. Find your local Firestone dealer today at firestonetire.com/dealer.
Ready to make more money? Use a better load board. For a limited time, get 50% off Truckstop Load Board Pro. Just go to truckstop.com/go and enter promo code READY2023 when you purchase Load Board Pro.
It's tested and proven. Burn 2.1% less fuel when you balance all wheel ends with Centromatic. Call 800-523-8473 to get the OOIDA discount.
Welcome back, and welcome to our weekly stop through the states to check out what changes may be taking place, changes that could affect you out on the road out there. Today, Keith Goebel of Landline Magazine has some updates out of Minnesota. Keith, good to see you.
Scott, good to see you. How you doing?
Doing just fine. We're always happy to have you here. So Minnesota, one of a growing number of states out there that is legalizing marijuana, or has legalized marijuana, I guess at this point, for recreational use. It's something law enforcement obviously is going to have to adjust to, and this one has implications for the trucking industry, which we'll get into here, of course, as well. But first, the basics out of this move in Minnesota, pretty straightforward, it looks like.
Yeah, can you believe this? This is a trending topic around the country. This is no, I say that facetiously, if I pronounce that correctly.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, it's really picked up steam. And you've got states that obviously maybe not an issue, road safety that maybe is given much consideration to. But like in the case with Minnesota, it is something that as they were getting to the point of enacting on August 1st, their law enforcement, state agencies, safety agencies, they held a press conference about their concerns about what it was going to mean for road safety to allow adults to legally possess and use cannabis and cannabis products there. So yes, it's road safety numbers in Minnesota here for the past decade, specifically how they relate to drugged driving, have been worsening. And with this additional aspect, legalization of cannabis there for recreational use, can only, I guess, intensifying, I guess you could say, the concern that, road safety officials there in Minnesota do have.
And one interesting aspect of this new law there in Minnesota, I think, you'll correct me if I'm wrong here, but I don't remember hearing other states, I guess even looking into this possibility, but they are looking forward to or looking ahead to having a pilot project that would be centered around oral fluid testing on the roadside, right?
Yeah, essentially a tie-in with this new law being enacted is, there was also state legislators that approved this oral fluid pilot project. So it's going to allow law enforcement there around the state, if they pull someone over and they believe that they are impaired, not only by cannabis use, but for other substances. So essentially, if a law enforcement officer believes that a driver is impaired for any reason, they will be allowed to, get oral fluid as it's defined there by the state to test. And this is part of a pilot project. Doesn't necessarily mean that it'll ever go away, but there is a period of time where they'll be able to assess how the project has worked and determine the viability of continuing it. But again, going back to numbers that were made available there in the state, it is an issue, a concern of driving while impaired that they have, and this pilot project. Probably not an easy sell to get through the State House, but looking at some numbers that the state has provided, specifically, there was over a 10-year period, 6 to 10 years ago, in Minnesota, they had in the neighborhood of 7,000 incidents for driving while intoxicated. Yeah. And then the most recent 5-year period, that number more than doubled. So they're looking to make some safety enhancements, and part of it again is this oral fluid pilot project.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting challenge for not just Minnesota, but all the states out there that are legalizing marijuana. Is how do you detect that at the roadside, and this is one option that Minnesota is exploring there. One thing we should emphasize and underline and put in bold and all of that is that if you are a professional truck driver, if you have a CDL, the rules for this type of thing are very simple. It may be illegal for, everybody else out there, but if you have a CDL and you're a working truck driver, the rule is as simple as it gets. You can't do it. That's it, period.
It is quite simple. Yes, for professional drivers,
Yeah.
it is quite simple, yes.
Yeah, and that's a good reminder for everybody out there that you just cannot use it if you want to keep your CDL and not face a ton of consequences, not just professionally, but legally as well.
Yeah, there's no state-to-state exception. It is just cut and dry.
Federal
Do not
regulation.
use, yes.
Yep, absolutely. Let's move from marijuana to fuel here, shifting topics, but staying in Minnesota, where the governor recently signed a bill into law that offers up some protections for price gouging. We've seen other states doing this, and now Minnesota has jumped on board.
Yeah, we're getting closer and closer to 80% of states around the country that have at least some type of price gouging ban. And I haven't gone down the list, but I would say it's probably pretty fair that just about all of these, if not every single one, includes fuel in their price gouging protection. Minnesota has been one of the states that has had no type of price gouging ban, whether it's fuel or any other essential service. But yeah, that is changing now. As of the 1st of August there in Minnesota, retailers are prohibited from engaging in any sort of price gouging during an event such as a man-made disaster, if there's a public health emergency, or if there's some sort of national or local emergency. There would be protections in place for these essential consumer goods or services as the state has defined, and that would include fuel.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something that we saw kind of pop up, I guess, during the pandemic, and especially when fuel prices were spiking across the nation in terms of people taking advantage of others. And we've certainly heard stories of people doing that. So hopefully this there in Minnesota will help, stem that tide. But I guess the question is ultimately, how big a problem is this? What's it going to look like when somebody gets caught, busted for price gouging there in Minnesota? And there are a number of things that could happen to that business.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to what is a retailer, what are they prohibited from doing specifically? And if they've got, if they're charging a price, again, for whether it be fuel or if even transportation services, food, water, if they're charging in excess of 30% what the cost was within the prior 7 days, it would be a violation of their law. And for violators there in the state, for each sale or transaction that it's done that is determined to have been price gouging, there would be fines up to $10,000. So in 1 day's time, if you're taking advantage of consumers and you maybe say a fuel station that was to do it, how many violations could I say deceitful or dishonest, just a rotten retailer, how much fines could they rack up? Definitely getting serious on that issue in the state of Minnesota.
Yeah, and certainly the trend, I think maybe you mentioned that 37 states now have some type of price gouging ban in effect. New York did look at this issue real quick. And actually decided against doing this, right?
Well, it just didn't move forward. I mean, it wasn't voted down by any committees or full chambers. It's just something that just kind of died off. So, yeah, they'll have to wait again in New York for 2024 to see if they can do anything.
Whether it's marijuana or price gouging, Keith, we know you're on top of all of this, and you'll keep us updated. We'll see you again next time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
You can check out Keith's work at landline.media. That's where you can also get up-to-the-minute news from the trucking industry 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's our show today. Thanks for listening. Landline Now is back tomorrow, and we hope to see you then.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like and subscribe. If you want more content, go to landline.media to get updated news, information, and archived editions of our show. Once again, that's landline.media.
I'm a dad,
a son,
a husband,
wife.
I'm a writer. photographer.
I farm.
I'm a veteran.
I love old cars, fishing,
My kids.
Chrome.
And I am
a professional truck driver.
And together, we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us! Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.